All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show, Valeria Torres.
Hello, how are you guys?
Hi.
Thank you so much
Oh,
for having me. It's such a nice thing to be able to do this today. So
yes. I know we've been talking about getting you on the show for a little while, and then, a couple of days ago, Val texts me and says, "Hey, I'm ready. Mars went direct. Mercury went direct. Let's do this." And I said, "Yeah, let's do it. And should we do this Thursday?" And so we just kind of it all happened pretty quickly around the Pisces full moon in August 2018 here.
yes, and then we spoke about doing it on Thursday, and I said, oh hey, not only is it under the full moon of Pisces energy, but also Thursday is the day that is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter was is the traditional ruler of Pisces. So it's just kind of all coming together that way.
Yes, exactly. And we'll talk a lot today about how Pisces relates to all of this journey that we're on and why we would be concerned about the ruler of Pisces too. So let me first read a little bit about you, Val, for everyone. So um, Valeria Torres, Astro Val is what you call yourself, has been pouring her soul into the esoteric subjects since she remembers. She truly reconnected with herself through astrology. And so sharing this ancient wisdom has become her life purpose. She offers astrology sessions, teaches for an online astrology school, and has hosted various workshops and retreats on the subject. Valeria's goal is to connect you to a deeper level to help you heal and understand the nature of your soul through self-love and compassion, while creating an atmosphere for transformation with her coaching skills. Very good. She says, we are here to shine our own light through self-acceptance. She believes that once we recognize who we truly are, the gifts and challenges we incarnated with, we will align with our unlimited potential. So I love that.
Yes.
Okay. That's my yoga swing in the background. You guys don't get freaked out. So
Those are so much fun.
it is. I like to go upside down. It's one of my magic tools. Okay. So Val, we are here, and we're all, we're all on the human journey that binds us first of all, right? Mm-hmm. And we're here with astrology and this question that we're holding about addiction and how that comes up. And of course, when we're talking about addiction, I think today, let's really be broad about it. Our listeners, we really, we come from a place of food addiction, being interested in that. But really, I think, if we're talking from a spiritual perspective, and tell me if you agree, at the end of the day, addiction has, we can really link it to some common spiritual roots. What do you think? What do you think there?
I agree. I think that when I think of addiction, I think of Neptune, and I think of Pisces, and I think of the 12th house, and astrology, all related. And for me, addiction, what I've noticed with addiction is seeking of unconditional love outside of ourselves. So we begin to look for external sources of that higher source, of that connection with the higher source. And that's when we use addiction, we use drugs or food or whatever the source of addiction is, because we are not able to connect with that source within ourselves, with that unconditional love that we are. So that's all Pisces Neptunian energy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love, that you use the words unconditional love. And if we're talking about Pisces, Neptune, and the 12th house, all of which are related in their symbolism, but they're not the same, right? We can talk more about that, but they do have related symbology. So if you're listening, just, you know, you can hold that. We can also talk about God, right? Or the connection with the divine or something greater, higher self, higher power. This is talked about in many, many various ways. And I think love is, you know, is a wonderful way to talk about it. So however, yeah.
This is how I would like to explain it and break it down so that the audience can understand the difference and the similarity between those three things. So we can explain that to them now.
Sure.
Neptune rules Pisces. Neptune is the planet that rules Pisces, and Pisces is the 12th sign. It's the last sign, so that's the 12th house. So they're all that same energy. Neptune rules unconditional love. So we would say that Pisces is also that energy of Christ consciousness. It's that compassion. Mm-hmm. And 12th house is that connection to source, is where we dream. And so that is where that, and it's also the inspiration, all of these three things where when we are in this connection with a higher source, we become inspired and we dream. And this is also when we are in spirit, when we have that connection to God. So when we are inspired and when we are in that connection with spirit, then we are able to tap into that unconditional love. And when we are not in connection with that, then we begin to seek it in external areas.
Yeah. So I think, you know, what's really interesting here to just name is that what we're talking about is that from an astrological perspective, everybody has Neptune somewhere, everybody has Pisces somewhere, everybody has a 12th house to larger or smaller degrees, you know, and it looks different in everybody's life. However, we all share the need to connect to something that transcends the personality, that transcends, you know, just simply the tangible plane. So we're really naming here that from an astrological perspective, that's a basic human need, right?
Yes, and it's the reason why we're here. It's the reason why we are here. It's unconditional love. We are unconditional love, and we're here to remember we are that source. So it's our nature.
Yeah. Yes. And so I think what's really interesting is that for many of us, we're coming maybe from a background or a culture or a childhood where we weren't, that part of us wasn't nurtured, you know, or we weren't actually told that that's a part that needs care. And so I'm just interested in that place where we are seeking something and we don't know what, right? That like, what is it that I'm seeking? But I'm hungry. I have this deep hunger. And then, you know, that moment of choice of like, what am I going to do about this, right? So let's talk about that maybe.
Yes. So I think what you mentioned is part of the human condition of not maybe it's remembering that we are that, because for the most part in this human reality we are not taught that, or we don't feel that so much from a young age. And so being able to now take that responsibility of remembering that that's who we are, that source is within us, and that we are able to make that decision to connect to a higher source in a healthy way, is our responsibility. And so to me, the antidote to Neptune is Saturn.
Hmm.
Bring us to ground that energy to this incarnation. Saturn is a ruler of time. Because of Saturn, we are here. Saturn is the ruler of manifestation. It's this. So even having this podcast today, we're in Virgo season, which is an earth sign, and we can see how Pisces is the spirit, is the spiritual world, is the soul. And in order for there to be a soul, there has to be this body, there has to be this mobile. And so we have to be able to ground this source of inspiration, this source of spirit into this reality with this body. So being able to come back from that high and being in our bodies and being grounded in our bodies and taking responsibility for the foods that we eat, for sleeping a good amount of time, good amount of hours, all of these responsibilities that come with being human, is to be able to regulate and ground down that Neptunian energy, that high energy that can sometimes be go into fantasy world and go into the addiction world. So I would say every planet, every energy, or everything has its positive and its shadow energy, or its a shadow side. And so for Neptune and Pisces, it's that unconditional love that we are looking for. And then in that search of looking for that unconditional love, we can sometimes go into this fantasy world. So to keep it in the middle, to balance it between this fantasy and this unconditional love that we are, and kind of bring it back to the center, is to really regulate it with Saturnian energy, which would be really responsible for being here.
Okay, so let me just, name what we've already said, and just kind of make some bullets here and organize it so that we, build on that. So what we're saying is that everyone has an area of their life in which we need to connect to a higher power. That's part of basic health, right? And that we were not really taught this, in elementary school. We weren't taught it. Some of us were by our parents, some of us weren't. Some of us had, some kind of a container, like an organized religion, or some of us just had it, come from a really spiritual background and we had it. And some of us didn't. And, if we lacked some of that acknowledgement that this was an important, necessary part of our lives, then maybe we were more apt to reach for something outside of ourselves when that need arose, right? When that desire to feel connection with the whole, when that came up, maybe we had that tendency to, we didn't know how to name it, we didn't know what it was, so we said, well, this food tastes really good and makes me feel that bliss of my eyes rolling in the back of my head, or, I realize that when I take a drink, I feel that all my inhibitions go away and all of that stuff, that baggage of being human is no longer there. So then then I feel really free. That soul liberation, right? So,
interesting point with that, because it's bringing up a side of Neptune, the escaping.
Yeah.
Reality. It's that escapism. Like, let me get away from what I'm feeling right now and go to another substance that's going to make me feel really good, because it doesn't feel good to be me right now.
Right. Yes, exactly. So we've said those things, and then you also brought in, and we'll see how we can weave this all together, that, right from the beginning, that there's a way in which we need to keep a picture of balance, right? So inside of us, where it's really not just about, we can recognize the need for divine connection, but it's also not about going out there so much that we are losing the connection with the physical body, with embodiments, that really with everything in astrology. And I think that this is something that can use a little bit more lip service. With everything in astrology, we're talking about integration. We're talking about coming to balance. We're talking about, that really the Tao, right? I mean, the middle way. At the end of the day, that's really what we're talking about with astrology as well. So, okay, I think we've said a lot already. And, okay, so, Stephen Forrest, who is one of my favorite astrologers, he's an evolutionary astrologer. I don't know if you've done, a lot of...
Yeah. I've done some reading on him, yes.
Okay, so his take on Neptune, he just wrote the book of Neptune not too long ago, a couple years ago. So if anyone's interested in the subject, that's a really great resource. And he talks about Neptune in our lives. It's not an active planet, right? It's a more passive planet. But he does talk about how if we have a healthy Neptune function, what that looks like and what that brings to our lives, as opposed to an unhealthy. So can we talk about that, Val? Like, from your perspective, I mean, yes, it's that feeling of unconditional love, but when someone has a healthy Neptune functioning, and of course it's going to be different in the houses, we can talk about that too. What is the core thing that we want to share that what health does it bring?
A healthy Neptune is going to be inspiration. It's going to be creativity. It's going to be that artist, that singer, that's really that connection with source that's allowing this person to channel all of this inspiration and be this artist. So that's a healthy Neptune. A healthy Neptune is a dreamer.
Mm-hmm.
Is going to bring us a lot of this beautiful inspiration. An unhealthy Neptune is going to be in a fantasy world. An unhealthy Neptune is going to be influenced by so many people because it's lacking the boundaries. Because a lot of the times, very strong Neptunian energy becomes very empathic. So that's when we feel so much about what's going on with the world, with the collective, and we feel, what is in front of us because we're so in tune to that collective energy. So can also become depressed, can also become, there could be a lot of suffering because of the lack of boundary with an unhealthy Neptune.
Yes, and it can also be psychic as well, right? So that picking up on others' energy to the point of, wow, I can actually see things, or I can, I'm clairsentient or clairvoyant, or, and as you said, I mean, it's so interesting because that can be such a beautiful, powerful skill to have, an ability to tap into. We love our intuitives, and at the same time, it's like, you got to really ask yourself if you want that, because in getting that, there's this added responsibility to learn a whole new set of tools to manage your own energy and your own gateways, right? Like, when do I want them open and when do I want them closed? And can I really learn how to do that on command? Because it can't be open all the time. That gets into another shadow side of Neptune, right? Which is like an insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Now you're bringing this up, and all I can think of is this. And that there's this saying that says, the higher the tree, the deeper the roots. Because the higher we become, the more sensitive energy we become, then we need to really learn to ground down those roots, which is this Saturnian. There has to be that balance in order for us to be able to deal and for us to manage to be channels of that high energy and bring it down to the earth without it being damaging to us, without us going crazy.
Yes, yes. I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it. And what it also, makes me think of is that for those of us that are more, that perhaps haven't emphasized 12th house in our charts, or, a really Neptunian direction, a really mystical direction in this life. And we can talk more about how to find that in the individual charts. But for those of us who have that, we might have a hunger for connection and that transcendent experience, to the point where we sort of neglect the Saturnian. We neglect the time, the structure, all those things that you were talking about that keep us grounded. And yet, I think what's so important to learn, and what we do learn, I think, as life goes on, is that the more we actually nurture the container of the body, the more that spirit just flows through us unencumbered, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't actually have to make a lot of effort. Yeah.
Because it's natural, right? That's our
yes.
gift. It's our gift. So, and the word that you said that describes this perfectly is responsibility. We just have to take responsibility for our bodies, for our own energy. How we're directing the energy, our energy.
Yeah. Finances, right? That's another thing that can be a very balancing thing for if we're feeling, kind of spaced out or ethereal, and we need to ground. Doing something that's very concrete can bring us back, right?
Yes. And I believe that the spiritual energy has to be materialized. It has to be even. It really has to be even. If not, we'll get lost in both. Even if we are too grounded and we lose touch of that higher source, then we're going to be looking for something outside of ourselves, right? But if we are channeling that higher source energy through us and still taking responsibility for our finances, taking responsibility for our body, then we become this embodied awakening source of bliss.
Yes, exactly. That's so beautiful. So it's not about transcending the physical in search of the spiritual. It's about bringing the spiritual through us down to this plane, which, we all know that we need it right now. So can we become channels by taking exquisite care of ourselves?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you, in terms of different charts, different journeys, I always call the chart, the astrology chart, a map, for our incarnation, for our journey. So in terms of different journeys, what do you see? And, what's interesting here about those of us who maybe have, a lot of Neptune, we have a lot of stuff in, the 12th house, perhaps, or, we have Neptune right on our midheaven or something, as opposed to, maybe those of us who really don't have that much, and we're just kind of, what do you see, and what have you learned and want to share about that?
Immediately, and like you said, you see it as a map. I see it as a blueprint. So for me, astrology is just that tool for us to really get to know ourselves. So if you don't know you have all of this Neptune, if you don't know you have all of this inspired, this mysticism inside of you, and you live in a very structured home, and all of your life you've been longing for this connection, that's when you start seeking for something else, because you're really looking for that connection through yourself. So,
it happens.
Yeah. So I would say as soon as I see a very Neptunian chart, I immediately want to bring them back to reality too. And I want to introduce that world, and I want to give the person permission to allow themselves to study mysticism, to pray, to dream, to meditate, to be able to withdraw from the physical reality and see their nature as a spirit, to be able to feel spirit. So that's the first, that you have to understand that we are spiritual beings, that we are energy. And as soon as they're able to feel that, then we remind them to come back to ground themselves, because then they will take that tendency to go up high and stay up high flying like little birds. So always keeping that balance, always reminding that balance between those two.
So is it fair to say that the more Neptune a person natally has in their chart, the more you balance that with the grounding energy? Is that kind of what you're saying?
And every person is so individual, right? Because you can have a person that is a high Neptunian energy that grew up in a household that was very strict, and so that Neptunian energy has never been able to
Yes.
to be tapped into. So if that's the case, then we invite the person to tap into that fantasy world and see the beauty that is in there, see that inspiration
Yes.
they are. And if we have someone that has already completely tapped into that Neptunian energy and is lost in this fantasy world, then we bring them down and say, bring that down, bring that inspiration right here, right now, and show us what you can do. Show us, be that channel.
Yes, absolutely. I just was thinking as you were talking about how Neptune can also be the person who is a bridge between other worlds with this world. So if we are to accept or to believe, not, I don't know if believe is the right word, but if we can agree that there are other realities other than, this particular one that we all share in the causal, concrete reality on the three-dimensional plane, then we can also understand that there are some of us that have great access to all of these other realms, and that these other realms have something to teach us. They have something to show us about our power, our potential in this world when we talk about creativity, right? And at the same time, um, we need to then hone the kind of importing process, right? Because it has to be effective. We need to effectively take whatever we're channeling from our dreams, from our journeys through other worlds, and we need to effectively bring it into this one, and we need to be effective vessels. And so that's, I think, where the grounding comes in, and that balance comes in again.
And a lot of the times too, I would like to bring this up because it's important. When we are dealing with Neptunian energy, sometimes we will encounter, if we are not responsible for bringing that energy back, someone else will direct it, or the energy will direct itself in a way that is not authentic to us. So that is why grounding down the energy is so important.
Say more about that. Like, give us an example, or say more. That's so intriguing.
Yes. So if we are, let's go back to the addiction process. If we are in a state of unconsciousness, right? And I'm talking about high, like a drug or something like that, that is taking us out of our bodies. Mm-hmm. And we are And if we are not responsible for our bodies, for our embodiment, then we allow other sources of energy to come in through our bodies and do what they will with our energy. And this is what we could even call like these hungry entities or ghosts and things like that, that can and will destroy who we are. And we see this a lot in addiction. You know, we see the anger, we see the violence, we see a lot of this negative traits coming out because it really isn't us. It's not that authentic source of love that we are. It's something else that's taking over us. So that's why emphasizing on the responsibility of taking care of our bodies, of being grounded, to ground down this energy is so important.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, this comes to, you know, in addiction, it's so fascinating to observe someone in addiction, because they will, when they're, you know, when they're clean, when they're sober, they'll be one person. And then when the substance or whatever it is that they're using is inside of them, it's a total, you know, Jekyll and Hyde scenario where suddenly, you know, that person will display the violent behaviors that you're talking about, or the anger, or the just something that is, it feels like it's like, you know, demonic, a kind of energy that's coming through them that is not, it's not who we know. You know, it's not that family, that loved one, or that friend that we know when they're not in that. So yeah, I think it's really, really a good thing to bring in. I mean, when we talk about alcohol, you know, some people will even point out that linguistically they're called spirits, right? Like, what are we imbibing? Are we actually imbibing something that kind of hijacks our own sovereignty?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's, I mean, Neptune is the ruler of spirit, of spirits, of even, you know, like alcohol and all of these, anything that takes us out of our conscious awareness. So it
Mm-hmm.
can be prayer, and it can be meditation, and it can be all these other tools. Anything that
Yes.
takes us out, it's just what we said at the beginning, how we choose to do this. And
Yeah.
that's what makes the difference.
Yeah. So for a lot of folks, you know, one portal out of addiction is through meditation. So that's, you know, or a spiritual practice like yoga. And that's why this is starting to make sense to us now, right? Why that is because we're really replacing a very destructive, potentially destructive way of connecting to what feels like higher power. We're replacing that with something that's a little more neutral, a little more clean, less inclined to take over us or hijack us in any way, and more just like helping us to connect with our innate, inherent spiritual nature and love nature, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's why yoga is just such a complete science, because it really embarks the polarity of Virgo and Pisces. It's the mind, it's
Mm-hmm.
the body, and the soul. And it's just like that trinity of everything in between, of the polarities and everything in between, that makes it such a ideal practice for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so you're sitting with someone and they have a lot of strong Neptune. So, you know, again, it's about the grounding, and it's about channeling, right? It's about like, oh, you have this strong energy. Okay, like let's use it. We're definitely not going to put a lid on it. We're not going to put it in a box. We're not going to make it wrong, but we need to channel it into how are you going to make this a beautiful addition to your life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That is the number one thing with Neptune. It has to find an outlet. It has to find a method of pouring, all of this energy, this channeling has to come through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so finding that, and for every individual is different, you know, it just depends on where it is. It depends on the connections that it has. And a lot of the times too, a way that we can see how a person is dealing with their Neptune, if it's and it's shadow, if this person has a lot of shadow work to do with Neptune, or if this person has already done a lot of the work and has this free flow energy with Neptune, we can look at the chart and see how the connections of their natal Neptune is. So if their Neptune is in a square, in a tension, you know, if you see any red lines or something like that, we know what we need to do. Conscious work with Neptune and really bring it up to the surface, and maybe create some boundaries, maybe learn some grounding techniques, things like this. So that's also a really helpful tool with astrology. And of course, if we see that Neptune is very well aspected, that has a beautiful long blue line to the moon, to the sun, then we know that this person is just a walk-in muse of inspiration. And so we also want to make that person aware of that and say, hey, listen, did you know that you have this amazing possibility or this amazing gift? Come on, let's use it if they're not already using it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to run through some tools real quick, and then I want to get back to something you said. So tools for channeling Neptune, right? Meditation, yoga, creativity. If you haven't done The Artist's Way, you know, Julia Cameron, that book can be an amazing, you know, way to unblock that Neptunian creative energy. And what else? What else? What do you think, Val?
Prayer,
Prayer.
you know, just singing, just dancing. Um, it's, you know, just for me, the ideal is yoga.
Mm.
Um, and love, you know, when you really love, like unconditional, when you have this pet that you just love, that is Neptune.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling, really embracing the love that you have for other beings, and even, you know what, the number one thing, yourself. So being able to feel that love within you,
Yes.
that's a huge connection to Neptune.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I love it. Great. And then just to clarify something you said earlier, you were talking about the shadow. If someone has a lot of shadow work around Neptune to do, what does that mean? Some folks listening, you know, we haven't gotten a whole lot into shadow work in this podcast, though I want to. That's really, you know, one of my next things I want to get into a lot more. But, you know, for those folks who don't even know what shadow work, or like, what is that? And you know, I mean, we talked a little bit about the shadow side of Neptune, but for someone personally, what might that look like?
Okay, so shadow work, think of something that happened to you that caused you some discomfort. And you said, I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to put it in the closet and we'll deal with it later. So then something brings it up, and then we have to deal with this emotion that we put in the closet. And being able to look at our shadows, you know, it's kind of like what we left behind. It could also be some karma. It could also be even things that have been inherited to us. You know, a lot of this drug addiction or any addiction is passed down to us by our parents, by our ancestors, you know? So doing that shadow work of what is behind us, looking back and sitting with what is dark, with what we are not able to clearly see, what we don't really usually pay attention to because we put it in our subconscious. So, you know, sometimes when we sit in meditations or when we do guided meditations, when we sit in medicine journeys, when we sit in a lot of these practices that take us into a deeper level of awareness, we are able to see what is in our subconscious and work with that. And so it's anything shadow work is anything that we have reprimed, that anything that we have suppressed, that has to be dealt with. Because if we don't deal with it, it's going to deal with us.
Yes, exactly.
So those emotions that we have suppressed will eventually come up, and they'll want to come up in a way that that's why we then look for external sources to make us feel good about it, because we feel bad about something that's inside of us and we don't want to deal with it. So we just kind of eat some more to make us feel good, so that whatever's inside of us, we can just kind of bury it and keep putting it down and putting it down so that it doesn't come up and we don't have to deal with it.
Yes, yeah. So it's basically a cleanup, right? We're talking about when we're ready, we're talking about doing our spring cleaning, right? Cleaning out our closet, cleaning out the cobwebs, looking at all that, and some of it maybe we didn't even see ever in this lifetime. I mean, if we're looking at it from either a genetic or a reincarnational perspective, it's like some of those things might be totally new to us. So that's the nature of shadow work, right? And okay. It can be scary, right?
It can be, yes, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to sit in front of of demons. It takes a lot of courage to
Yes.
to face something that you didn't want to face before. And a lot of the times we don't realize that what we had put behind us, and we finally decide to sit, years later, decide to sit with it. We're different people, and it's easier. We have to be able to face it. We have to be able to face what we have put behind us. So,
Yes.
We can heal. That's when the healing happens, which is also very Neptunian. That energy of that higher source is what allows us to heal these wounds. It's what allows us to heal and then be able to feel that unconditional love that we are. It's just that we've put some heaviness on top of it that we can't remember what it's like. But as soon as we heal it and we let it come up, then we're able to, oh my God.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I love that you bring up feeling, because really so much of the time with this work of looking at our shadow parts that we swept under the rug, all they really need is to be felt fully, right? Mm-hmm. And what addiction is, in one way of looking at it, this is just one way of looking at it, we can pretty much look at all addiction as a way to not feel the escapism that you were talking about before. Our feelings feel too overwhelming for us, and this is not bad, and it's not wrong, and it's not because we're weak, and it's not because we're not capable. It's that we might need more support. It's that we might need to just be reassured that we actually won't, the feelings won't kill us, even though it feels like they will, right? And so once we may find that once we just learn how to sit with ourselves and learn how to feel everything that's coming up and those difficult feelings, that we do get through it to the other side. And once we do, and once we learn, we can actually learn it like a skill, like riding a bicycle, to get from the beginning of the emotion to the end of the emotion, having felt it fully. And then what do we get? We get a surge of energy, right? We get a surge of creativity. We get a surge of, wow, I integrated something and now I have a larger capacity than I did before, right?
I really like that word integrated, because a lot of the times we feel guilt for having these feelings. Mm-hmm. And by creating that guilt inside of us, it doesn't allow us to get past it. And as soon as we say, it's the yin and yang, there we are that darkness that is light. And so as soon as we feel that darkness that there is, that shadow that is there, and we sit with it and we integrate it into a part of us that we love it and we love it, it all of a sudden, it doesn't disappear because it's still part of us, but we learn to love it. And that love transforms. And it just, we feel complete.
Yes. I feel different in my body just having talked about that, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
The energy just completed itself.
It's true. It's true. It feels like we really made like we completed a cycle or we completed a piece. Just deep breath. I love what you say that, you know, no feelings are wrong. No, we might feel a feeling and like, really, can we become okay with everything? I mean, you know, with these feelings that maybe we were taught like to never feel selfish or to never feel, you know, angry toward your family member or your child or your whatever. And then when we feel those feelings, we think we're bad, you know, and it's like how human that is. You know, we're really the observer that can observe all of it, and we can make a container big enough to hold it all, right?
And the gift of astrology is to be able to see these patterns from a higher perspective. So you can, you know, there's a way that we can see, oh wow, this person has a tendency to feel guilty, or this person has a tendency to feel like they're not worth it, or you know, they lack self-worth, or that can, you know, if we're aware of this and we can bring this up and say, hey, you know, you are worth it. You are worth of unconditional love, and you don't have to feel guilty because you. So we can bring awareness, because sometimes it's difficult for us to see these things, these patterns within us. And when you can see it in this blueprint and this map of your chart of astrology, it makes more sense, and you know that this is something that you're working through in this lifetime. So you know, you work on it consciously, and you say, okay, you know, like, oh, I love and approve of myself, like I'm worth it, and you give yourself a hug knowing that that's what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And this is what I love about astrology, right? Is we get this blueprint, we get this map, and it's neutral. I mean, none of it is good or bad. You know, we might see red lines, we might see blue lines. That's not good or bad. It's, you know, energy aspects. It's, um, you know, it's just energy moving in different ways and how it's decided to incarnate.
It reminds me, it's the same, you know, it's the yin yang, the red, the blue. It's us.
Yes.
And so it's the acceptance and to give ourselves permission to be entirely us, as Neptunian, as Saturnian, as, you know, as much fantasy as we have, or as much strict as we can be, and just to see it and decide what we want to do with it, decide how we want to bring it into balance. And that's
Yes.
the beauty of being human. It's the free will of deciding what we get to do with what we are given.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And gosh, I just had this thought pop into my mind that I'll come back to in a moment. But with, um, you know, with the chart, when you get a reading, you know, and if you, I just want to encourage everyone to, you know, if you haven't gotten a reading, to start really considering this as a possible tool in your life, because when you see your chart, not only can you start observing all these things as not good or bad, you can also start to see how inherently real this is for you. It's like you're not making this up in your mind. This is real. It's right here. It's on this blueprint. It's on the map of the sky, the way that it was, the snapshot of the sky when you were born, you know, and it's a snapshot of the psyche, right? When we were born.
A
Mm-hmm.
lot of the times it's like we know this, you know, like for instance, for me, I was always so curious about mysticism. I was always just like, the occult called my name when I was young, but growing up in my house, we just didn't see that. So the moment I learned astrology and the moment I was able to see, oh, this is what I am, then it gave me permission. And even though I
Yes.
knew that, and something deep, 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 deep inside of me always knew that, it wasn't until I was able to kind of receive that confirmation and that affirmation and that permission, to give myself that permission to say, oh yes, okay, this is it.
So you were able to see your chart and actually find, like, right here is the signature for me being an incredibly mystical person. And like, duh, that my life unraveled in this way. Duh, that I've been drawn to, to these mystical things my whole life. And that's what's so remarkable, right? Is that you can see your chart and say, like, oh my God, that's confirmation of all these things I've been feeling. But because of societal norms, because of how I was raised, there was no place for it. And now I have a place for it. And what a deep breath out we can take, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's all about self-acceptance. It's all about, but it's knowing thyself. So we have to learn who we are and what we are about, and then we accept ourselves, and then everything else transforms because we are authentic. And when we are authentic, then we are in that a constant flow of connection with source, and we can bring that authenticity to this realm, to this earth. And what that, I mean, for me, I feel like that's our responsibility, to really be authentic and bring that channel, that higher source that we are, higher selves, bring it down here. And if we could all do that, if every human being, we could all be authentic channels of light, how beautiful would this world be? How complete would we all be? I mean, we would then really recognize each other as who we really truly are. Because if you're being authentic, I'm being authentic, then we can both be these authentic mirrors to each other, and then there's no illusion. There's just authenticity everywhere we go. And
Yes.
that would be my ideal Neptunian world, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, and the way to get there is through all the work we're doing, right? All the shadow work, all the looking, all the sweeping out of the closets. Okay, so we have about, just a couple minutes before I want to just get into a little more about, how folks can find you, and if they want to book a reading and what you offer. And so what, is there any last kind of things that that you feel like wants to be said before we wrap up here?
I think I just mentioned it all in the last few sentences. Really, it's our responsibility to do what we need to do to be happy, and it's all us. It's all us, right?
Yes, yes, yes,
So
yes. Mm-hmm.
let's do it.
Yes, let's do it. And if I just want to say, like, for those out there that are dealing with addiction, that it is so not hopeless. It is so possible, um, and within our reach to just learn, like we learn anything, to redirect that energy and to experience ourselves, like, all of that energy, the addiction energy, it's not going to disappear. It's going to be used for immense creativity. And that's the thing that I really want folks listening to take heart and watching to take heart, is that you can take that energy, and channel that. So no more beating yourself up about, I'm bad for having addiction. It's like, no, I just never learned how to use that energy in the right way, because we're living in a world that's, frankly, a little bit, not all parts of the world, but in a lot of pockets, there's a little bit of, we're still really learning what it means to be energetic beings, and to really take on the responsibility of having that power. And that it's fun. It's fun to transform addiction, because it's really like becoming an alchemist. and
Mhm.
becoming a magician, you know, of life, where you can see, I'm sorry about the background noise, I don't know where that's coming from, but you can really start to see how, like, oh my God, I can use all that energy and create more amazing things than I ever thought, because I have a lot of it. You know, it's inside of me, it's flowing through me. So it's fun, it's good work, it's fun work, and it can all be a very enjoyable process of recovery. So that's all, you know. And I'm on the recovery path myself, so I speak, you know, to it all from a place of complete empathy and experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I will say one last thing.
Yeah.
What shifted the game for me was to go from feeling a victim, you know, like, to feeling that sense of responsibility, like no one is going to save me, no one is going to take me out of this but myself. So I have to step it up, and I can't feel like a victim anymore, and I can't point fingers at anyone. And I'm not even going to do it to myself. I didn't know better. Now I'm learning. Now I'm knowing. Now I know better. So now I'm going to take responsibility. And that gave me the courage and the power to come out of feeling like the victim. So,
I love it. Totally. It's responsibility is freedom,
yeah.
right? It's freedom and it's power. Okay. So Val, I'm just really thankful for you and you being a fellow astrologer out there in the world. Um, and, you know, so folks can get readings with you. They can get readings with both of us, you know, and so, and we have, this is the amazing thing, is that we have clients that actually see both of us, right? Like, and I love that, because folks can see different astrologers and get different perspectives, and this can be such a big part of the journey of sexual, where did that come from, self-actualization. um, you know, so this is wonderful. Tell me how folks can book with you. Tell us.
Sure. So you can head over to my website, astrowithval.com, and visit my website. You can also email me, astrowithval@gmail.com. And then you can also follow me on Instagram at astroval. And I'm constantly updating, you know, full moon, new moon updates, and just things that come, you know, like I'm just this channel, and whatever comes flows, and I write it and I put it out there, and it's with my, you know, full passion that I do what I do. And I do it because it changed my life. I do it because it's who I am right now, and I have to let this light outside of me by sharing what is coming through. So that's what I do. I'm so grateful for you for allowing me to share my light with you, and with all of your audience, with all of you. And gosh, I'm excited for this. I'm happy. I'm grateful. I'm humbled by being here. So thank you.
Yay. Thank you so much, Val. Okay. Have a great day, and we'll have you back again. Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Bye,
Enjoy.
everyone.